Honourable members, I advise of the presence in the gallery of Ms Vida Goodvash, President of the Northern Territory Jewish Community Association and Vice President of Executive Council of Australian Jewry, Dr Janice Warren, Secretary of the Northern Territory Jewish Community Association, and Professor Alan Berman, Dean of Law at CDU, Charles Darwin University, and Committee Member of the Northern Territory Jewish Community Association. On behalf of honourable members, I extend a warm welcome to you. I call the Chief Minister to speak on the condolence motion.
Madam Speaker, I move that this Assembly express its profound sadness and condolences to the family and friends of the 15 victims of the Bondi terrorist attack on the 14th of December 2025. Further expresses its deepest condolences to Australia's Jewish community and in particular the Jewish community of Sydney and the wider Sydney community. Pays tribute to the bravery of those whose acts of courage saved lives on that terrible day. Condemns the hatred, extremism and evil behind the gunman's actions, and on behalf of all Territorians stands with Australians in our call for unity and peace. Madam Speaker, they came to celebrate. They came to share the Festival of Light together with other Australians. They were someone's father, somebody's mother, somebody's child, somebody's babi, zidi, savta, saba. Like us, they lived in the lucky country, a place proud of its multiculturalism and belief in giving people a fair go. 15 Australians, 15 innocents, 15 victims. Words are inadequate to express the white-hot anger, the gut-wrenching horror and the deep, deep grief. Madam Speaker, like most Australians, I was shocked when I first heard of the atrocities at Bondi on Sunday, the 14th of December 2025. An unimaginable evil had struck. How could this happen? Here in our nation, on Bondi Beach, an iconic and internationally renowned relaxed playground for everyday Australians. The Bondi attack was the largest terrorist attack on Australian soil in our nation's history. Families were torn apart, loved ones missing the chance to say goodbye. Fear, terror, and inexplicable grief. Just 6 minutes is all it took to carry out this atrocious attack and send a shockwave across our nation and around the world. Australians of all walks of life were shocked at the ferociousness and horror of the attack. This is not the Australia we want, and this is not who we are. Today, as a parliament and as a community, we come together in absolute unity to call out this behaviour, to grieve and to solemnly reflect on the lives lost on Bondi Beach that fateful day. And I thank Vida Goodvash, who is the President of the Northern Territory's Jewish community, of course, Janice as well as Secretary and all of the other community members who are here today. Michelle, thank you very much for coming. Today, Madam Speaker, we mourn and remember Edith Brutman, Vice President of the New South Wales branch of International Jewish Group B'nai B'rith, described as a gracious woman who was very, very passionate about dealing with prejudice and discrimination. Tanya Tretiak, 68, a loving grandmother who was out with her family to celebrate Hanukkah. Reports say she spent her final moments shielding a child from gunfire. Sophia and Boris Gurman, 62 and 69, who had been married for 34 years. Their 35th wedding anniversary was due last month. Sophia worked at Australia Post while Boris was a retired mechanic. Bondi locals, they have described them as honest, hardworking, kind, warm and respectful. And they were brave, very, very brave. Tried to stop one of the attackers, killed while trying to stop one of the attackers by grabbing his gun and wrestling with him. Boris Tetelroyd, 68. Boris was with his son, Yakov, at the festival when the shooting began. Both men were wounded, Boris sadly fatally. He was a musician and a cherished family man. Adam Smythe, 50. The father of four was walking along Bondi Beach with his wife Katrina when gunfire claimed his life. He loved his sport following the Liverpool Football Club, Sydney Swans and the Manly Sea Eagles. Tybor Whitson, 78. Together with wife Eva, Tybor Whitson were part were part of an organisation, Friends of Refugees of Eastern Europe, or FREE. It brought elderly Russian-speaking members of the Jewish community together. He was a much-loved grandfather and great-grandfather. Tragically, one of his grandchildren was a first responder and was treating people when she came across his body. He was affectionately known as the Lollipop Man, as he handed out sweets to children at shul. Rabbi Yaakov Letvian, 39. This father of four was described as the spine of all Jewish organisations in Sydney. He was the chief operating officer of Chabad in Bondi and shared a close bond with another victim, Rabbi Eli Schlanger. As reported online by Chabad News, Eli had the visions and ideas and Yaakov figured out how to get it done. They died together and were laid to rest on the same day. Reuven Morrison, 62. Reuven Morrison migrated to Australia from the former Soviet Union in the 1970s as a teenager. He told the ABC, "We came here with a view that Australia is the safest country in the world and the Jews would not be faced with such anti-Semitism in the future." A retired businessman, he was devoted to his community and he sacrificed his life in order to help others flee, throwing bricks at one of the gunmen to distract him and using his own body as a shield. He was a devoted family man who was fun and happy to be around. Alexander Kleitman, 87, a Holocaust survivor who came to Australia from Ukraine. He was a keen chess player, an author, a defender and promoter of the Jewish faith, a father of two and grandfather of 11. He had survived unspeakably harsh conditions in Siberia. He died shielding his wife from bullets. Marie-Clare Pogany, 82. Her family said she was known to all as Omi and was a beautiful mother, grandmother, sister, aunt, and steadfast friend whose warmth and energy touched countless lives. She was a long-serving volunteer and had hand-delivered 15,000 meals to Jewish seniors via a kosher Meals on Wheels program. She was a dear friend to the former president of her homeland of Slovakia, Zuzana Kaputova, even attending her inauguration in 2019. And she was a keen and good bridge player, forming many friendships over years through that game. Peter Meagher, 61, a former police officer, working as a freelance photographer at the Hanukkah event. Marzo, as he was known, spent decades volunteering at Randwick Rugby Club and trained as a dive master. In the police, he had risen to the position of detective sergeant until his retirement in 2020. He was described as a gentle and calm, a loving man and a respected police officer who believed in justice. He had received a number of commendations during his 35-year-long policing career, including for his work on the investigation into the Lint Cafe terror attack in December 2014. Dan Elkayam, 27, a French IT engineer who had moved to Australia in 2023. A keen soccer player, or football as he insisted on calling it according to his close friends. He was remembered as an adventurous young man who loved to travel and who was friendly to everyone. Rabbi Eli Schlanger, 41, respected and loved by his community, a father of 5, head of the local Chabad mission and one of the organisers of the Hanukkah by the Sea event. Rabbi Schlanger and his wife had just celebrated the birth of their new child in October. He served as a chaplain to New South Wales Correctional Services and at St Vincent's Hospital in Darlinghurst. He was remembered as a passionate, energetic and happy person. And beautiful 10-year-old Matilda Britvan, Madam Speaker. So devastatingly young, Matilda was given the most Australian name that her parents knew. She was bright, joyful and spirited. She loved animals, practiced judo, and like all 10-year-old girls, was thrilled that she'd just mastered her cartwheels and her splits, Madam Speaker. She loved her younger sister, Summer, and tragically on that fateful December day, Summer witnessed her beloved sister be shot. Madam Speaker, the story of these 15 incredible Australians will remain with all of us because their lives mattered and they will be remembered. Today, as a unified, democratically elected parliament, we offer our thoughts and prayers to the families and loved ones experiencing the raw pain of this attack. We stand in solidarity with the Jewish community in the Northern Territory, Sydney, and across Australia. Anti-Semitism and hatred have no place in this country. On Friday last week, while in Sydney for National Cabinet, I visited Bondi, and in Jewish tradition, I placed a rock at the memorial where I inscribed, "With love, Northern Territory," and I made a small heart on the back. While there, I was fortunate enough to speak with one of the chaplains who had been delivering services to the hundreds of people who had been gathering daily to reflect, grieve, and pay their respects. Chaplains had been there providing support and lending an ear to people who needed it. Volunteers were there busy collecting every single stone that had been placed in order for them to be kept and later put in a memorial. I had the opportunity to speak with Peter Wertheim, the co-CEO of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, about the profound impact this tragedy has had on all Australians. Madam Speaker, as horrific as this tragedy is, we must not forget some of the amazing and inspirational stories that have come to light. We all saw the footage of the surf lifesavers and off-duty medics helping the wounded while gunfire continued to explode around them. They were the shopkeepers, cafe owners, and North Bondi RSL who hid people in their premises, giving them safe haven when they were fleeing from the shooting. Complete strangers shielded others with their bodies. People like Tash Williamson, who had been operating the petting zoo at the festival with her mother and stepfather when the shooting began. She grabbed Matilda's younger sister, Summer, another girl and a young man with a disability, and held them close until after the shooting. Her mother, Ali, also shielded a young girl. Then there's Jessica Rosen, who was 5 months pregnant with her third child at the time. She used her body to shield 3-year-old Gigi, who she didn't know but she saw crying as people fled in terror around her. Gigi's father, Wayne, said that Jessica is a superhero, but Jessica said that any mum would do that. Madam Speaker, we also heard about 14-year-old Chaya Dheran, who left where she was sheltering to lay on top of 2 young children, shielding them from the gunman. Chaya was shot in the leg and thankfully survived. Her grandfather says her name means life, and she delivered on that day, Madam Speaker. The Bondi lifeguards on the day braved the intense danger to help others both during the shootings and after. Lifeguard Jackson Doolan ran from a neighbouring beach armed with medical supplies. He had heard the shooting and ran towards it. Rory Davey helped rescue those who had fled to the sea when the shooting started, like student Levi Zhu and his friend, who started to struggle in the water but didn't want to call for help. They were afraid of drawing attention of the shooters. Lifeguard Rory plucked them from the sea, as well as others who were in that same situation. And when the wounded and dying needed to be moved urgently, the lifeguards used their iconic red and yellow life-saving boards as stretchers. Surf Lifesaving New South Wales Chief Executive Steve Pearce said at the National Day of Mourning, he was very proud of every lifesaver who saw things that night that people should never see. Madam Speaker, police officers Constable Scott Dyson and probationary Constable Jack Hibbert, both very new to their jobs, didn't think twice about risking their lives as they ran towards the shooting, helping people to take cover. They were both very badly wounded. Let's not forget Detective Senior Constable Caesar Bazzara, who heroically broke his cover to deliver the shots that ended the siege. A veteran of 16 years' experience in the New South Wales Police Force, Detective Senior Constable Barraza's aim was true in his subsequent actions in helping secure the terrorists and the scene, helping his junior officers. His follow-up actions, it's a massive credit to himself and the New South Wales Police Force. Brave, quick-thinking professional, Madam Speaker, and we salute him and his colleagues. We are also grateful to the teams of medics, the paramedics, the emergency hospital staff, the nurses, the doctors, the surgeons, who we're told didn't even need to answer the call to serve. They raced to the hospitals or to the site to render assistance and save lives. Some were already at Bondi having some time off, and they bolted to action, treating the wounded even as bullets were still flying. And Madam Speaker, no one in the world will ever and should ever forget the astounding courage of Ahmed Al-Ahmed. The footage of him wresting the rifle from one of the shooters, all while getting injured himself, is something you cannot forget. He was asked what made him do it, and he replied, to stop him from killing innocent people. This 44-year-old Syrian refugee, a father of two, an Australian Muslim, was a unifying force at a time that our nation needed it most. The embodiment of courage, compassion, and humility. In the depth of great darkness shone so many lights, highlighting the strength, resolve, and determination of the Australian spirit. In the hours and days after, more than 100,000 Australians rolled up their sleeves across the nation and gave blood to support the victims. These deeply personal and meaningful contributions are proof once more that good always triumphs evil. On behalf of the people of the Northern Territory, I also express our thoughts and prayers to Premier Chris Minns and the people of New South Wales. Madam Speaker, following the attack, I made contact and then met with members of our local Jewish community, including the member for Johnston, of course, who are understandably distraught and deeply concerned. We provided as much support as we could at a time of great uncertainty and provided police to give security information to try and ease any local concern. From Central Australia to the top end, Territorians held vigils, and it was wonderful to see the moving response to the stone laying instigated by the member for Johnston and religious leaders out the front of Parliament House, of which we all participated. Madam Speaker, now is a time for unity and to come together as a nation. We are one and we are many. We will never forget what happened at Bondi. We will never forget the 15 innocent people who had their life ripped away from them in a brutal and callous act of violence and hatred. Madam Speaker, I pray that justice be done, that grieving family and friends find peace, and that as a nation we unite to ensure this never happens again.
I call the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise with a heavy heart to support the motion. Edith Brutman, Dan Elkayam, Boris Gurman, Sophia Gurman, Alexander Klaitman, Rabbi Yaakov Ladivan, Peter Meager, Reuven Morrison, Marika Pogani, Rabbi Eli Schlanger, Adam Smith, Boris Telteroyd, Tanya Trekiak, Tibor Wetson, and young Matilda. Madam Speaker, those 15 names should echo in this chamber. 15 innocent people from whom that day should be an ordinary day. A summer evening with family, with friends, a community celebration, the beginning of school holidays. And instead it has become a day of mourning. As we meet here in the Northern Territory Parliament today, we commemorate those lives that were taken in the Bondi massacre, and to place on the record something that must be said plainly. This was an act of anti-Semitism. Jewish Australians were targeted. A celebration of light was met with darkness, and our nation will never forget it. To the families, to the friends, and to all those who carry grief from that day, we cannot lift your pain, but we can stand with you, and we can ensure that our country stands with you. Not just in words, but in resolve. Madam Speaker, among that horror, Australians also witnessed extraordinary courage. And we honour the spirit of the Bondi community, the surf lifesavers, the lifeguards who rushed to that scene, the New South Wales police officers who ran towards the danger, the medical teams, the firefighters, and the ordinary community members who became those first responders in an instant, without thinking, providing aid and comfort when it mattered most. In moments when fear could have taken over, people chose humanity. And we should say, clearly and with gratitude, those heroes saved lives. And I also want to place on the record, Madam Speaker, our opposition's thanks to the Chief Minister and her office and the Northern Territory Police for briefing us in the wake of those attacks. And in particular, the Acting Deputy Commissioner, Travis Wurst, for updating us on the work that the police were doing here in the Northern Territory for the support offered to our local Jewish community at the time, when anxiety and stress were acute. Madam Speaker, it is important to honour the heroes of Bondi, and it is also important to learn from the mistakes that allowed hatred to grow louder in our community and across our country. We must confront the truth that in the period following the 7th of October, not enough was done to combat anti-Semitism. Not early enough, not consistently enough, and not firmly enough. And that is why we support the national measures to confront anti-Semitism and to strengthen the Australian social cohesion, including the federal government's Royal Commission into Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion, which we hope, Madam Speaker, will be able to shine a light where too often there has been evasion, minimisation, or the deadliest one of silence. But we also must confront something else, Madam Speaker, that leadership matters and social cohesion is not built by slogans. As leaders, particularly in politics, but in all facets, in community life, even in the media, we need to acknowledge that sometimes our own behaviour and our own rhetoric and our own willingness to inflame division rather than lower the temperature has not helped our community come together. We must be capable of moral clarity and not moral convenience. It is not a binary choice as a leader. Compassion should never be selective, and hatred can never be excused, ever. When we speak about practicing what we preach, we should remember the example of Ahmed al-Ahmed, who, without knowing the victims and who they were or their story, or what the attacker's intentions were, or why the violence was unfolding in front of him, put his own life on the line because it was the right thing to do. He did not ask who deserved help. He acted. That is shared humanity, Madam Speaker, and that is the standard that we should all set for ourselves in this place. Madam Speaker, I close in acknowledging Ms. Vida Gorbach, Dr. Janice Warren, and I haven't seen Professor Alan Bergman, but I have spoken to him. The Northern Territory is one of the greatest multicultural successes in the world, and it did not happen by accident, Madam Speaker. It was built deliberately through leadership, through respect, through connections, and the daily work of all of our communities choosing to live together. We honour the leaders who have come before us, who have shaped that legacy for the Northern Territory, which is why it's so important to reflect on what has happened in New South Wales. Our strength can be their strength in that deep time of grief. Madam Speaker, in this place, we owe it to the leaders who come after us and to the children who are watching us right here, right now, to ensure that the Northern Territory remains a place where people of every culture, of every faith, are safe, welcomed, and feel like they belong in our community without fear. May the victims of Bondi be remembered. May the heroes of Bondi be honoured. And may we do that work that ensures that this nation, Madam Speaker, never again sees a day like that again. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Deputy Chief Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise today to pay tribute to the lives lost during the horrific terrorist attack at Bondi on the 14th of December last year. An act of violence that shocked our nation and will be forever etched in Australian collective memory. I also acknowledge the Jewish community here today, and I thank you for your presence. This was a deliberate act of violence that targeted innocent people going about their daily lives in a public place, in a place that should always represent safety and freedom. The Northern Territory stands with all the Australians in remembering those lives lost. We remember the 15 victims and acknowledge the families who had their lives changed forever. We recognise the extraordinary bravery of the first responders who acted with courage and professionalism in the face of these unimaginable circumstances. The medical teams, the police, the emergency personnel, the members of the public who acted with selflessness and resolve in the face of chaos and danger. Their actions saved lives and brought comfort in the darkest of moments. We also acknowledge the deep impact this event has had on the broader Bondi community and Australians everywhere. Anti-Semitism and hatred have no place in our country, no place on our streets, and no place in our institutions or our society. Australia is at its strongest when people of all faiths, cultures and backgrounds are able to live safely, openly and without fear. While recently in Alice Springs, I met with two women who were part of the Jewish community there, Karen Zelinsky and Hadassah Daraki. These women expressed their love for Alice Springs and the community they were part of, and have most importantly spoken of the rich and diverse territory, a place which they are proud to be part of. It was a reminder about the cultural richness of the territory, and you just have to look around the chamber today, Madam Speaker, to see that diversity. We are elected by Territorians to govern, to reduce crime and to restore our lifestyle. We've all spoken in this chamber about the importance of unique territory lifestyle, and part of that is a diverse, multicultural community. We want to be strong. We want to have connected communities across the Northern Territory, free from fear and hatred. While no words can undo the harm suffered, we owe it to the victims and to the public to continually strengthen the safeguards that help prevent violence and protect our communities. In this time of collective mourning, the House pays tribute to the resilience of the Bondi community, whose compassion and unity have shone through in this aftermath. We honour the memory of the victims, and we extend our heartfelt sympathy to all those who carry the weight of this tragic event. Thank you.
Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to add my voice to this motion and to reflect on what this moment asks of us, not just in grief, but in leadership. The events at Bondi were devastating. They shook the Jewish community and they shook the country. And while today is rightly about remembrance and respect, it must also be about reflection. An awful and disgusting act of anti-Semitism on a community who did not deserve it. 15 lives lost at a time where they should have been celebrated. As leaders, we need to be honest with ourselves. Social cohesion does not maintain itself. It requires effort, restraint, and care. And I think it is fair to say that at times, across politics, across public debate, across community life, we have all fallen short of striking the right balance between spirited debate and respectful discourse. Disagreement is healthy in a democracy. Passion is not a weakness, but when our words harden divisions, when we fail to listen, or when we prioritise being loud over being responsible, cohesion suffers. Madam Speaker, the Jewish community has felt those consequences deeply. So today I want to say with clarity Territorians stand with you. You are not alone. I also want to acknowledge the tireless work of Vida Goodvac, Janice Warren, also my colleague, Justine Davis, the member for Johnston, and the Northern Territory Jewish Community Association, whose leadership over many years has helped foster an environment where people of all backgrounds, faiths, and cultures are able to live and work together with respect. Madam Speaker, I'd like to also acknowledge the pain, the strength, the leadership from the member for Johnston. I know it's been a difficult time for you, but you have guided us all through this, so I just want to thank you for that as a colleague. It's moments like these that leadership is not about speeches alone. It's about creating space, and the vigil that the member for Johnston set up, helped arrange on the steps of Parliament, did exactly that. It allowed us to gather, to mourn, to reflect, and to stand together in a way that was dignified, respectful, and deeply human. That mattered to the Jewish community and to the Territory more broadly. Madam Speaker, if there is one lesson we must carry forward, it is this: cohesion is a shared responsibility. It belongs to all of us in this House, regardless of party. It belongs to leaders in every community, and it requires humility, the willingness to say that we can do better, and the resolve to actually do so. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister for People, Sport and Culture.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to contribute to this condolence motion. At the outset, I acknowledge those in the gallery today, including members of the Jewish community, and I extend my sincere condolences to anyone in my electorate and any Territorian who has been personally affected by the tragic and violent terrorist attack at Bondi on 14 December 2025. In particular, I would like to recognize Vida Goodvac, President of the Indian Jewish Community Association, an organization that I met with prior to Bondi incident and in the immediate aftermath, along with Janice Warren, Vice President of the Jewish Association. Although unable to be here today, I also recognize Dan Shivan, a teacher who is a migrant from Israel to the Northern Territory, and his wife, Maria Veskan, notably contributing significant history to the Darwin Holocaust Memorial and Education Center at the Darwin Military Museum. When the terrible news from Bondi emerged, one of the first calls I made was to my parliamentary colleague, the member for Johnston, not as a political act, but as a human one. In moments like this, differences fall away. When one community is targeted, unity must be our response. Shared humanity must always come before division. Madam Speaker, unfortunately, 14 December will go down as a day that into the future. Unfortunately, we will say to each other, where were you when you heard the news of Bondi? And we immediately reflect on connection to community, connection to places, and connection to family and friends. My own connection to Bondi and the Jewish community was only brief. However, having spent my first years in Australia in New South Wales, it was a must-do location to visit. It is a beautiful place to visit, to picnic and play and spend time with family and friends. These are the most innocent of pastimes. There can be nothing more pure. It is why this attack was not only on innocent lives, but on the values that underpin our nation: safety, freedom, mutual respect, and the right of all Australians to live without fear. Its impact was felt far beyond Bondi, reverberating across Australia and into communities here in the Northern Territory. As we know, the attack occurred during Hanukkah, a time when families and members of the Jewish community were gathered together, sharing moments of faith, family, and reflection. What should have been a sacred, peaceful, and innocent time was violently taken from them. The timing of this attack compounded its cruelty and amplified the pain felt by a community that knows too well the consequences of hatred left unchecked. Madam Speaker, what we can take away as a community is the response. By and large, the sense of community unity in the days and weeks that followed were overwhelming. Whether it be on national and international stages, with large events like the silence observed during the third Ashes cricket test in Adelaide, or New Year's Eve event in Sydney, with the image of a menorah projected onto the Harbour Bridge and Opera House. It was humbling to see Australians respond. When we marked the National Day of Mourning on 22nd January to honour the victims of the Bondi terrorist attack, it was a day observed across the country in shared grief, reflection and solidarity. Even our own Parliament House was illuminated to acknowledge the Bondi victims and honour their lives on that day. Madam Speaker, here in the Northern Territory, we saw that same spirit of unity reflected in the days and weeks that followed Bondi tragedy. Despite the horrific event only just occurring, a previously scheduled Hanukkah gathering hosted by the Northern Territory Jewish Community Association went ahead. It became not a celebration in the usual sense, but a moment of connectedness and resilience, embodying the true meaning of Hanukkah as the festival of light, perseverance, faith, identity, and hope in the face of darkness. I was honored to attend that dinner on behalf of the Northern Territory government, to pay my respects to our Darwin Jewish community and to stand alongside them during what must have been an incredibly difficult time. Thank you, Vida, for the humbling invitation to join you at this time, shared with others who came to support, including former Senator Nova Perez and also the member for Johnston. Madam Speaker, I was also honored to attend separate vigils held here at Parliament House, including those organized by the Multicultural Council of the Northern Territory with the support of member for Johnston on Sunday, 21st December, and also the Sunset Candlelight Vigil organized by members of our South Pacific Nations community the following Sunday, 28th December. In keeping with Jewish tradition, those present laid stones at the main Parliament House vigil, including many of my colleagues in this chamber today, to pay our respects and stand in solidarity with Jewish Australians. The sight of these stones building up over the next week was a moving reminder of those that lost their lives. Each stone laid tells our Jewish community that we are with them at this most difficult of times. Madam Speaker, the sunset event hosted by the Friendly Island People Association in Darwin and led by Reverend Williami Miller demonstrated the love, respect, and sense of warmth that these communities offered to the family and friends of those lost at Bondi and to the Jewish community in the Northern Territory. These events where Territorians from all backgrounds came together to mourn, to lay stones, to light candles at sunset, and to stand shoulder to shoulder in rejection of hatred and violence. These moments matter. They show who we are as Territorians. Madam Speaker, on a personal level, just over a month after this event, I visited Bondi with my family on a heavy rain-soaked day in Sydney. Standing at the memorial was deeply moving. It was a place of quiet sorrow, but also one of the dignity and care. On the day of our visit, Rabbi Novak Konpoleski was present as members of Jewish community continued to take turns caring for the memorial, holding space for remembrance, grief, and reflection. That simple but powerful act speaks volumes about resilience, faith, and collective responsibility. I also wish to acknowledge the New South Wales Police Force and all first responders whose actions in the immediate aftermath of the attack and whose continued presence since have provided reassurance and safety during an extraordinarily distressing time. Their professionalism and calm reflect the very best of public service. Madam Speaker, before concluding my remarks, I would like to reflect on the privilege of living here in the Territory. Here in the Territory, we do things differently. Our multicultural community is not just something we speak about, it is something we live. We are proud to be home to many multicultural associations, including the Northern Territory Jewish Community Association, and we are strengthened by the diversity, generosity, and contributions of migrants and refugees who call territory home. It is not something that was created. It is product of the way this community grew. It is in our DNA. It should be something we are very proud of it and defend with all we have. Part of that DNA is being a Territorian first and then an Australian and rejecting conflict or bringing conflict from other places. This is captured as what is often used in commentary around these issues as social cohesion. I would suggest, Madam Speaker, that by and large, the Northern Territory could give the rest of the country a lesson on social cohesion. As the Minister for Multicultural Affairs, our government is committed to supporting our community to be a place to envy through our approach to grassroots multiculturalism. We want to ensure our communities are supported, connected, and empowered, not just in moments of celebration, but in times of grief and challenge as well. Madam Speaker, since the Bondi attack, I have spoken with many people from Muslim backgrounds across our community, including medical professionals, business owners, and people from many walks of life. They have been unequivocal that the terrorists responsible for these heinous acts do not represent their values, their faith, or their community. They have made it clear that these acts compound the challenges they already face and unjustly place innocent people of faith under suspicion and pressure they do not deserve. In closing, I would like to touch on one final lasting memorial. Earlier, I touched on Jewish tradition of laying stones, with many hundreds of stones laid out of Parliament House in the 2 weeks following the Bondi tragedy. Madam Speaker, the Jewish community collected these stones and have approached this government to find an appropriate lasting memorial to house these stones forever. Madam Speaker, I am pleased to confirm that we have found, in association with the Jewish Association and working together with the Darwin Military Museum, that we will do a memorial at the Darwin Military Museum at East Point. Members may be aware that the Holocaust Memorial, which have been open for the past 18 months, is a permanent exhibition tracing the history of the Holocaust and is dedicated to the memory of all victims and survivors. The exhibition provides a space for reflection and education. It is designed to foster empathy, awareness, and critical thinking about one of the darkest chapters in human history. The concept of permanently adding the stones to this memorial was raised by the Jewish community, and we will work toward an appropriate date to open this to the public. I wish to place on record my sincere thanks to Dan Shivan and Vida for the incredibly thoughtful and deeply personal tour of the Holocaust Memorial. I also take this opportunity to acknowledge Norm Cram and the team at the Darwin Military Museum and the Defense of Darwin Experience, a truly unique place of territory history, where every visit reinforces the importance of remembrance. Madam Speaker, being there a few weeks ago with Dan and Vida was humbling, as the common goal was to simply find a way to reflect on how to best honor the lives of Bondi victims. Today, in this chamber, we are here to do the same thing. The Bondi attack on 14 December 2025 was a moment in time for our country to stop, pause, and refuse to allow this to occur again. Anti-Semitism, extremism, and hatred have no place in Australia. They have no place in our communities, our institutions, or our public life. Madam Speaker, today we remember those who were lost. We honor their lives, and on behalf of Territorians, express our deepest condolence to the family, friends of those tragically lost. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Mulka.
Madam Speaker, I rise to share my condolences with the Jewish victims of the Bondi massacre and their families and the Jewish community. I'd also like to acknowledge all those people who responded bravely and with humility by trying to protect innocent people as the tragedy unfolded. I'd also like to share my deep condolences with the Jewish people of the Northern Territory who also felt the terror of this attack. So some of whom are here today. This attack also comes right into this chamber as one of the members of the parliament. Her family and her community are targeted by hate crime. I'd like to reach out to my Kutara Wamutjan here in this chamber, the member of Johnston who is Jewish and grew up in Bondi Beach. Kutara Wamutjan, I acknowledge the hurt of that you have gone through. You have been feeling during this time, and I stand with you. I stand with you, Uttara, beside you. And you know that by the words Kuttara and Wamutkan is actually the family are being adopted into Aboriginal family. That's how much we care and bring people together to be with us, so that you feel you're not alone. You feel you have a family here as well. That's through our Yolmorom. I am always with you, and will be with you. And I guess we have a family sitting up the top there. We are also thinking about you, everybody, that our thoughts and feelings are with you, the community, whatever happened. On this land, we have people from many places, of many backgrounds, and of many faiths. This is something that has existed for tens of thousands of years. Different tribes live on all around the country of Australia. And today we want to live with harmony and accept people of different cultures living together and celebrate the diversity and our diversity, rather. When somebody comes along with hate and violence, it deeply impacts everyone. And we must not spread more fear and create more violence. We must turn to our neighbors and show them that we care. For this tragedy, we can show people that we do not want to live with division rather. We want to live in a place that is safe for everyone. Madam Speaker, the Jewish community have known terrible tragedies. The Holocaust of the World War II is a story of great horror. It is something everyone must ensure never happens again. as an Aboriginal person, I understand this. And on the 22nd of the January, when we shared a day of mourning, I could understand this mourning. Many people of the Aboriginal community now is mourning. I know the stories of my family, my grandparents being shot at by a pastoralist on our country, and of another grandfather being taken away by police and being treated badly, walking all the way to Darwin prison from Arnhem Land. We know the stories of massacre at Garngan in northeast Arnhem Land and elsewhere. We know these things in our histories and in our hearts. And I know that there is a need for healing, and we can hold hands of our Jewish brothers and sisters at this time as they experience this tragedy and feel fear in a place where they should be safe. We understand some of your suffering because we too have experienced some of this suffering. And in response, we must fight to bring back safety by working together. Magaya Midarom, that is, this by creating a pathway for peace and harmony, together, for everyone to live together without fear. Today I convey my heartfelt condolences to the victims and the community. We were with your pain and we stand with you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Namatjira, Treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I rise today to express my profound and deep sorrow following the terror attack at Bondi on 14 December 2025, and I acknowledge the representatives in the gallery today of Northern Territory's Jewish community. Like everybody across Australia, Madam Speaker, Territorians watched these horrific events unfold in shock, disbelief and deep sadness. What was a place of joy, community and celebration was violated by an act of hatred and violence that stole innocent lives and has left families and communities forever changed. Today in this House we remember the victims, each one a person loved, each one a life of meaning and contribution, all taken far too soon. Madam Speaker, we honour them not as names on a list, but as parents, grandparents, children, friends and neighbours. Their loss is not only felt in New South Wales, but right across our nation. We remember each of the victims by name and with profound respect. Edith Brutman, a devoted community leader and advocate, remembered for her kindness and service. Dan Elkayim, a young man full of life and potential. Boris and Sophia Gurman, a devoted couple who confronted the threat at great personal risk. Alice Klettiman, an 87-year-old Holocaust survivor whose life was a testament to resilience and hope. Rabbi Yaakov Levitin, a spiritual guide and pillar of his community. Peter Meager, a former police officer and community volunteer. Reuben Morrison, who confronted danger to give others a chance to escape. Marika Pogany, whose warmth and care enriched those around her. Rabbi Eli Schlanger, a leader whose daily acts of compassion touched many. Adam Smith, a beloved father and local whose loss is felt deeply. Boris Tettelroyd, Tanya Trediak and Tibor Weitzen, each remembered with love by their families and communities, and Matilda, a bright and joyful 10-year-old whose life was unjustly taken far too soon. We honour Ahmed Al-Ahmed, a bystander who, without hesitation, confronted one of the attackers and disarmed him, saving countless lives at the cost of his own safety. His bravery exemplifies the very best of us in the very darkest of hours. We honour Geffen Bitten, who, seeing danger and distress, ran back towards gunfire in an effort to assist, even as he sustained grievous injuries. We honour Reuben Morrison, who, in a final act of self-sacrifice, charged at an attacker to protect others, allowing a mother and child to escape harm. We acknowledge the courageous first responders, volunteer surf lifesavers, lifeguards and off-duty officers who rushed to help under fire, providing first aid and shelter, using surfboards as stretchers and confronting the wounded while danger still loomed. And we remember others whose instinct was to protect the vulnerable, shielding children, guiding others to safety and offering sanctuary to strangers. These acts of selflessness, Madam Speaker, in the face of terror reflect an unshakable belief in the values of everyday life. Madam Speaker, the Northern Territory understands grief and resilience. We are a community built on looking out for one another, across cultures, faiths, distances and differences. When tragedy strikes anywhere in Australia, Territorians feel it personally because of our sense of community does not stop at our borders. In moments of darkness, we also look for the light. And at Bondi, that light came from many ordinary people who showed extraordinary courage. People whose first thought was to help others, to run towards danger rather than away. These are the people who make our nation strong, who forge the identity of Australians as a people who look out for others, a people who will have your back in times of need. Madam Speaker, this attack was also an assault on faith and identity. It targeted people gathered in peace and celebration, motivated by hatred and anti-Semitism. Today I want to speak directly to the Jewish community of the Northern Territory. To Jewish Territorians, this Parliament stands with you. You are valued, you are respected, and you are an integral part of our community. Your faith, culture and contribution enrich the Northern Territory, and any attack motivated by hate against you is an attack on all of us. The Northern Territory Jewish community may be small in number, but it is strong in contribution, Madam Speaker, in business, in professional life, in community service and in civic engagement. You belong here, you are welcome here, and most importantly, you are safe here. You are and always will be part of our community. And I take this opportunity to acknowledge the member for Johnston, a member in this chamber who is also a member of Darwin's Jewish community, and I acknowledge the deep sadness and hurt you have felt. Madam Speaker, Territorians reject hatred in all its forms. We reject anti-Semitism, racism and violence, and we reaffirm our shared commitment to respect, tolerance and peaceful coexistence. Madam Speaker, the Northern Territory is a place where people step in when others are in need. That is who we are, and I think that's what sets us apart from the rest of the country. Because of our isolation, we rely on each other to step up when others need help. We see it during cyclones, floods, bushfires and personal hardship. The courage shown at Bondi reflects values Territorians know all too well: mateship, responsibility and a belief that every life is absolutely worth protecting. To the families of the loved ones who were killed, there are no words that I can say in this chamber to ease your grief. But know this, your loss is acknowledged by this Parliament. To those who are injured, to the witnesses and to the first responders who carry that heavy weight of that day, we acknowledge your trauma, your courage and your ongoing recovery. Madam Speaker, as we honour those who were lost, we also reaffirm who we are as Australians and Territorians. We choose compassion over fear, unity over division, and strength over hatred. Madam Speaker, may the victims' families find comfort in the care of community and country. And may we continue to stand together, resilient, inclusive and determined in defending the shared values that bind us all. Madam Speaker, I commend these words to the House.
Member for Arafura.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to speak on this motion. A motion that reflects not only a moment of profound tragedy for the community of Sydney, but a moment that shook the heart of our nation. What was meant to be a day of joy, connection and celebration, a gathering centred on family, community and culture, was instead torn apart by an act of violence. 15 innocent Jewish Australians lost their lives. 15 people who had gathered in love and safety now leave behind families who are going through unimaginable grief that no words can truly erase. A day that began with happiness and warmth became a day marked in sorrow and mourning. And while it now has been almost 2 months since that horrific attack, the weight of that loss is not faded. And that's why we have come together today to remember the 15 lives lost and to pause, to reflect and to stand in solidarity. To acknowledge the pain felt by the Jewish community and to reaffirm that hate and fear has no place in the Australian that we all strive to be. I would like to acknowledge the extraordinary bravery of the Bondi hero Ahmed Al-Ahmed. On that day, Ahmed put his own life on the line. He stepped into danger without hesitation, placing himself directly in harm's way to stop the violence unfolding around him. His action helped prevent further loss of life and spared families from the devastation of saying goodbye to loved ones far too soon. Ahmed Al-Ahmed showed courage, selflessness and humanity that we must hold onto in times like these. He deserves the title of being a hero. Madam Speaker, as we reflect on this tragedy, may we continue to stand together to support one another and to honour those we have lost by building a future grounded in compassion, unity and empathy. And I acknowledge those in the chamber and the member for Johnston. Thank you.
Member for Wanguri.
Madam Speaker, I rise today not to debate legislation, nor to advance an argument, but to acknowledge a moment of profound national grief and send my condolences to the lives lost at Bondi Beach on Sunday the 14th of December 2025 and to their family and friends of those victims. And I also extend that to the members of the Jewish community here today as well. Madam Speaker, 15 innocent lives were lost. I also wish to acknowledge those who have now survived with lifelong injuries and the trauma for those survivors. What occurred in Bondi Beach was not just an incident confined to a place on a map. It was the rupture of the everyday fabric of our Australian life. Bondi is built as a place for normality, for errands, conversations and passing moments. And because it was so ordinary, because it could be any of us. Anywhere, it has shaken the country in the way that words struggled to hold. Madam Speaker, I say this as Bondi was the last place I lived before returning to the Territory after my own tragedy. I lived at Bondi Beach, I worked there, and I became part of that Jewish community. Today, I speak for Territorians, but also as an Australian, standing with millions of you and others who felt that shock in the chest, and it still lingers. We acknowledge first and without condition the lives that were lost. They were not symbols, they are not names scrolling across a screen. They are individuals who belonged to families, to friendship circles, to workplaces, and to our communities, and to you also, Member for Johnston. They had routines, plans, frustrations, jokes, and futures. Those futures ended violently and without warning. To their families, there is no statement in this Parliament that we can offer to feel sufficient. But silence would be worse, so let this be said plainly. Your loved ones mattered, their lives mattered, and the weight of your loss is recognised here, in this place where the nation speaks to itself. Madam Speaker, we also acknowledge those who did survive, those who were injured and those who walked away physically unharmed, but internally changed. Trauma does not announce itself, it arrives quietly, sometimes much later, and recovery is not linear and it's not visible. You deserve patience, support and understanding for as long as it takes, and our parliaments need to recognise that. Madam Speaker, in the midst of this devastation, Australians witnessed something else, something that deserves recognition without embellishing or mythology. People stepped forward, not because they were trained to and not because they were asked to, but because they saw another human being in danger and chose not to look away. There were individuals who shielded strangers, who guided others to safety, who intervened, and with nothing but innocence and courage. These were not acts performed for recognition. They were acts born of conscience, and while we must never romanticise tragedy, we should acknowledge the humanity that surfaced when it was most needed. Alongside them were our essential services, police officers who made split decisions under extreme pressure, paramedics who treated the injury amid chaos, firefighters who secured unsafe spaces, and hospital staff who absorbed wave after wave of trauma and carried it home with them when and even after their shifts. Their response was not abstract. It was deeply human work done under impossible conditions, and we must be honest, the impact of that work does not end when the emergency does. Recognition must extend beyond thanks to ongoing care, resources and support. Madam Speaker, what makes this tragedy resonate so deeply is not only what happened, but where it happened. Bondi Beach is a public place, a shared space, a place where Australians of every background move side by side without needing permission. And many tourists come and acknowledge the beauty that it is, the beautiful blue water and the white sands. Australia is not monocultural, it never has been. Our streets and schools, workplaces and communities are built from many history layers together. That diversity is not a weakness to be managed. It is a reality to be respected and protected. When violence enters such a space, it tests more than security arrangements. It tests our values. It asks whether we retreat into suspicion and whether we resist the urge to fracture. And Madam Speaker, I know for many Territorians, people understand the importance of community. They know that safety is not created by distance but by one another, but by connection. And this is across our territory, and we need that across Australia. Neighbours who know each other, services that are trusted, and systems that intervene early, not after the damage is done. That is the Australia we must continue to build across all communities. Madam Speaker, moments like this ask something of us beyond procedural responses. They ask us to slow down, to listen, and to remember that behind every policy decision are real people whose lives can be irreversibly altered in a moment. Let us honour those lost, not by allowing their deaths to harden us, but letting them sharpen our resolve and to do better and to stand together with fear that tempts division. Let us be clear about the work ahead and steady in our commitment to our country and our communities where public spaces remain places of belonging and not fear. And let us ensure that when history looks back on how Australia responded, it does not see panic or fragmentation, but care, responsibility, and our collection of strength. Madam Speaker, to those we lost, you are remembered. To those who grieve, you're not alone. To those who serve, you are seen. And to this nation, may we meet this moment not with suspicion, but with solidarity, because that's how we honour those lives and should still be with us today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Gwoja.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I do rise to offer my deepest condolence to the families, the friends and the loved ones of those affected by the horrific Bondi attack. I also stand here, Madam Speaker, as the member for Gwoja, the Northern Territory's largest electorate, the Northern Territory's most remote electorate. And I stand here to bring forward the voices of the heartache and disbelief so many remote Territorians shared in this moment of deep pain. Across every corner of the Northern Territory, Territorians were in disbelief of what had happened. Emotional, sad, crying because they could not believe that this was happening in Australia, the country that is supposed to be the lucky country. So I bring forward the voices of remote Aboriginal communities who share their condolence. They share in mourning of the loss of life in this horrific event, Madam Speaker. It is important, Madam Speaker, to remember that we stand here not as individuals, but as members who represent the Northern Territory. And I want to make sure that those voices are heard. They share in the mourning with the rest of the nation. Madam Speaker, this senseless act of violence has shaken us all. It has caused profound grief, fear and heartbreak, not only for those directly impacted, but for Australians everywhere. We mourn the loss of life. We stand with those who are injured, and we hold close those families who are now living with imaginable loss. Australia is a place where we should feel safe, safe to live, safe to gather, safe to embrace our cultures, our customs and our religion without fear. This is a fundamental value we share as a nation. Madam Speaker, I am not Jewish, but my family has connections and roots in the Jewish and Palestinian communities. Their lived experiences and stories remind me every day that violence and hatred only divide us, while compassion and understanding bring us together. I think about beautiful Matilda, a 10-year-old child who has lost her life. She is never going to know what an amazing country it is to live in Australia. I think about 10-year-old children who grow up being demonised for being Jewish, for being Palestinian. That is not the country I want to live in. We need to embrace each other. We need to celebrate difference. Children should not grow up in fear of being who they want to be or hiding who they are, their customs, their values, their traditions. We should be embracing that, Madam Speaker. There is no room for hatred in our community. This moment calls on all of us to choose empathy over fear, unity over division, and love over hate. I want to extend my heartfelt condolence to all of those affected, and I reaffirm my collective commitment to a safe and inclusive and compassionate Australia. In this time of darkness, we must come together to find the light, to support one another. To our Jewish communities in the Northern Territory and across this country, I say to you, we are all people, different in story but equal in worth. This is a country where you are valued. This is a country where you are loved. Madam Speaker, when we have a moment to reflect on that, let us remember that we are all people. We all come from different backgrounds. But what makes us better is when we come together and support one another. To be silent is to be complicit, Madam Speaker. And leaving here today, we cannot just leave having spoken words. We have to leave and take action. Take action so that when my cousins who are Jewish, who are Palestinian, are exposed to horrible comments, to discrimination, that we have a role to call that out. We have a role to support our fellow Territorian so that they don't live in fear, so that they feel free and empowered to go to celebrate their customs, their cultures, because we are a multicultural nation and no one should live in fear of expressing who they are. So the real job for us leaving here today, Madam Speaker, is to not be silent, is to stand up for the injustices, is to make the world a better place so that we don't see these horrific events unfold in the future, because that will mean that we are going down a path that is not good, and that is not the Australian way. The events that unfolded last year are un-Australian. I love this country, and I want everyone who calls Australia home to love this country. I want my Jewish brothers and sisters to move to Australia to know that they are loved, they are supported, and they are embraced to share their values, their traditions, as I want any and every person from around the world to know that when you call Australia home, you have access to live in a country that supports you, that values you, that loves you, and as we have seen, in a time of need, comes together and wraps their arms around you. That is the Australia that I choose. That is the Australia that I come to this Parliament every day to work hard to make a reality, Madam Speaker. And I do, like everyone else, want to acknowledge the member for Johnston for being the light of this Parliament in this time of tragedy, for making sure that we knew the appropriate ways to express our grief, our sorrow, and our support. And to the members of the Jewish community right across the Northern Territory, please do not be afraid in times of need to reach out to us, to talk to us. We are here for you as we are here for every single person who calls the Territory home. Madam Speaker, I still cannot believe sometimes the horrific events that unfolded at the end of the year, a time when families should be coming together to celebrate the holiday season. It is absolutely unimaginable, the trauma and the grief that our fellow Australians had to deal with during that time. Like the Chief Minister, I also want to acknowledge the amazing heroes who stood up, who put their life on the line to save fellow Australians. Our frontline services, our police, our ambulance, our paramedics, our healthcare providers, and our community members who came together in a time of need. That is the Australian way. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Brennan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise to offer my condolences to the victims of the horrific attack at Bondi, to their families, loved ones, and to those whose lives have been shattered by an act of senseless violence. What happened that day was confronting and deeply distressing. I, like many across the world, watched the news as it unfolded, waiting for the updates, seeing the number of innocent victims rise, and feeling that familiar helplessness, knowing that there was nothing that we could do to stop what was happening at that moment. Innocent people lost their lives in a much-loved and public place that should be safe, ordinary and familiar, and we know how iconic it is. A place where people were simply going about their day at the beach or nearby, attending a celebration event for Hanukkah, meeting friends, living their lives as they should. Madam Speaker, I know that no words spoken in this chamber today can ease the grief of those families. The families of our victims of that day, Edith Brutman, Dan Elkayam, Boris and Sophia Gurman, Alex Kleitman, Rabbi Yakov Levatin, Peter Mager, Raven Morrison, Marika Pagani, Rabbi Eli Schlanger, Adam Smythe, Boris Tetleroyd, Tanya Tretake, and Tabor Wheatson, and of course the youngest victim, Matilda. I also want to acknowledge the pain felt by our Jewish community, particularly here in the Northern Territory, and I know you all join us here today. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I believe this matters, and it matters that we all pause today to reflect. It matters that we acknowledge this loss, and it matters that we stand together in rejection of hatred, of violence in all its forms. The Northern Territory is a long way from Bondi, but I know Territorians felt this deeply. I've always believed the Territory is a special place. We are shaped by hardship and resilience, by people who came here with little and built lives together, by Indigenous Australians that have endured for many, many years, by migrants, refugees, defence families, workers, entrepreneurs, adventurers who chose this place, or chose, like me, to stay after being proudly born here. We are small in number, but we are strong in spirit. Our diversity here is not unfamiliar to me. It is lived. It is neighbours, it is schoolyards, it's workplaces, it's people knowing each other by name when you go to the shops. Our Jewish community in the Territory may be small, but they are part of who we are. They are Territorians, part of our shared story, and who belong here, just as every Territorian does, regardless of faith, culture, or background. And I say all this because as Territorians, we can share with other Australians how we deal with tragedy. What I believe defines us is not difference, but how we live with that difference. I know as Territorians, and of course Australians, that community matters, that looking out for one another matters, and that when something threatens the safety or dignity of any one person or group, it concerns all of us and something that we will not stand for. This attack was not just an assault on individuals, it was an assault on the idea that people should be safe in public places, safe to live freely, and safe to be who we are. Violence motivated by hatred has no place in our society. It has no place in Australia, and it certainly has no place in the Northern Territory. At the same time, I believe we must hold fast to what makes us strong, and not fear, not division, but decency and respect for one another. Territorians and indeed Australians have always faced hard things together, and regardless of our origins, I have seen how we rebuild after cyclones, after tragedies, bombings, and we have now seen how we stand together after Bondi. Many of us came together in keeping with Jewish tradition to lay a stone at Parliament House to remember those that lost their lives. I hope that each stone that was laid assures our Jewish community that we stand in solidarity with them at this most of difficult times. Madam Speaker, I was really pleased to hear the Minister for Multicultural Affairs talk about what was going to happen with those stones, with the request and support of the Jewish community, and how they're going to be sent over to the Holocaust Memorial. I think that's the perfect tribute. I've been to the Holocaust Memorial at the Darwin Military Museum only last year, and I absolutely encourage everyone to go along. It's fascinating and an amazing tribute to a tragic time in the world. The Territory's resilience is not resilience is not loud, and we are always reminded in times like this that Territorians will show up for each other quietly and consistently. Today, I honour those victims of the Bondi attack by remembering them, by standing with their families, and by recommitting myself and this Parliament to the values that keeps our community strong. That is who we are in the Northern Territory, and that is who I believe we must continue to be. We send our thoughts to those who lost their lives, and may they rest in peace. And may their families find strength in the support of a nation that grieves with them. And I pay my utmost respect to the member for Johnston, who I know is part of our Jewish community and much loved according to your Jewish family. Thank you so much to everybody so far, and I know there's more to come, who have shared today's condolences. It's a reminder of what we are to be Australians, and listening to each and every one of people's reflections and stories. I mean, it took me straight back to that time when we all heard the news breaking. But I think it's important that those stories were shared here today. And I'm very grateful and privileged to be able to be here listening and hearing all of those stories. And I look forward to the remaining stories that we'll hear today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Nightcliff.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this condolence motion, and I thank the government for bringing this to the House. On 14th December last year, as everyone has said here today, what should have been a time of celebration at Bondi Beach, a joyful Hanukkah event, was transformed into one of the darkest days in Australia's recent history. An act of brutal violence claimed the lives of 15 innocent people. I would like to thank the Chief Minister and others for sharing with this Assembly the names and stories of all the victims. This act of anti-Semitic terror has devastated both the Jewish community and wider Australian community as a whole. Today I stand in solidarity with those who lost their lives, who were injured and who mourn. For too many people, their lives will never be the same. I know that for me and many others, the image of Matilda's mother, Valentina, distraught and holding Matilda's coffin will stay with me forever. The pain of losing a child is one that every parent fears, and one which no parent should ever have to experience. And my heart is with Matilda's parents, Valentino Polvachenko and Michael Britvin, who have asked Australia to remember Matilda's name. I also want to honour the bravery of everyday Australians who selflessly covered children's bodies with their own to shield them from bullets. I have listened to the testimony of one of the survivors, Jessica Rosen, who, pregnant with her third child, protected a stranger's child, calming her and shielding her with her own body. For bystanders and lifeguards who rushed under fire to provide life-saving first aid. To Boris and Sophia Gurman, demonstrating unbelievable courage, who tried to disarm the gunmen and were both tragically and horrifically killed. And of course, Ahmed Al-Ahmed, the Syrian-Australian shop owner who took down one of the gunmen, risking his life to save an unknowable number of lives. This bravery and selflessness is who I think most Australians want us to be as a nation. And as others have mentioned, I want to acknowledge my incredible colleague, Justine Davis, who is part of the Bondi Jewish community. Your strength, wisdom and empathy and leadership are an inspiration to me and many, many others, and I'm sorry for your loss. I also want to thank Justine, Vida Goodback and the rest of the Jewish community for their leadership in setting up the vigil in front of Parliament House for the community to gather and honour the victims. Many of my constituents spoke to me and said how much it meant to them to have somewhere to go and gather and mourn. And the interfaith vigil that occurred was an incredibly moving and important event. So thank you for that. Every member of our community, but especially us as leaders of the community, have a responsibility not to merely express sorrow, but to stomp out the growing hatred and extremism in society. We saw another example of how this is growing when just a couple of weeks ago, another attempted attack of terror in Perth with a homemade bomb thrown into a crowd during a Survival Day event on Australia Day, which thankfully did not detonate. We must confront the underlying hatred that breeds this violence. We must confront and reject anti-Semitism and all forms of discrimination in our society. And Madam Speaker, this is why I spoke out against this government's weakening of our hate speech laws last year. I was and remain deeply concerned that these changes will allow more anti-Semitism, Islamophobia and other hate speech to grow in our communities, making our multicultural and multi-faith communities in the NT less safe and feeling less welcome. And I want to address something else with clarity and care. This attack was perpetrated by individuals driven by ISIS ideology, an extremist ideology of hatred that has nothing to do with a legitimate advocacy for Palestinian rights and human dignity that many Australians from all backgrounds engage in peacefully. In the aftermath of this tragedy, some have sought to conflate these two. This does a profound disservice to both the victims of this attack and to the many who work peacefully for justice. We must reject this conflation. What unites us in our grief today should also unite us in our values, that every innocent life matters, that every child deserves to grow up free from violence, that we can and must condemn the taking of innocent life wherever it occurs, regardless of who the victims are or who the perpetrators claim to be. I stand here today to condemn anti-Semitism, to condemn all hatred against people for their religion, their culture, or who they are. Everyone deserves to be able to practice their religions in peace and live free from discrimination and hatred. May our words today honour the memory of the lost in Bondi. And may this chamber and all Australians stand unequivocally against anti-Semitism, against hatred and division in every form. Thank you.
Member for Port Darwin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to speak on this condolence motion to extend my deepest condolences to the Jewish community here in the Northern Territory. And I grew up in New South Wales, and Bondi Beach was an iconic place that, as a girl from the country, a visit to Bondi Beach was something that was extraordinarily special and privileged. And to think of this beautiful part of Australia that is so iconic across the world having been so awfully damaged in the psyche of our country forever just defies logic. And like most people in this chamber, I will forever remember where I was in the precise moment that I learned of what was unfolding in Bondi and the total disbelief that this could be happening in our country in this day, when this is something that hasn't touched our shores, that shouldn't touch our shores. This is not who we are as a country. And to so tragically lose those beautiful 15 lives, and for so many people to have been so horribly impacted physically and emotionally and mentally for decades to come, is something that I will struggle with for a very long time. And when we look at the victims of this terrible, terrible tragedy and take in that many of them came to our country to escape environments that were horrendous, and they looked to Australia as a place of freedom, a place to celebrate who they were and who they wanted to be. Edith Brutman, Dan Eckelman, a French national who was here just living his best life. Boris and Sophia Gurman, who many of you have already said in this chamber, saw danger unfolding in front of them and unhesitatingly as a couple raced to try and stop a tragedy from happening, and so tragically lost their lives. Alex Kleitman, a Holocaust survivor who deserved to end his years in peace in the country that he'd come to learn to love as home. Rabbi Yaakov Lefman, Peter Mega, a policeman who had spent his entire career protecting and serving his community. Reuven Morrison, a Soviet-born businessman who came to our country to build a new life for himself and his family. Marika Pogni, a Czechoslovakian immigrant who was spending her time making her community better. Eli Schlanger, Adam Smythe, Boris Tetelrod, Tanya Tretiak, Tybor Weitzman, and none of us will ever forget the images of young Matilda just before the tragedy unfolded, having the best day with her sister. As a mum, I really struggle with what happened. As an Australian, I can't comprehend it. And as a Territorian, where we are such a diverse and multicultural community, where we embrace each other's differences, whether we celebrate them every single day, I just can't understand how in this country we have come to a point where this tragedy could have unfolded. To the member for Johnston, I extend again my condolences to you and your community. I can't even begin to imagine the strength that it's taken to be able to stand up in this environment, to put your needs to the back and to stand up for your community. And the Jewish community in the Northern Territory is a very small community. And one of the things I think that is so beautiful about the Territorian community is that we have been able to embrace the community. We've been able to stand there with them and been able to show them that it doesn't matter if you are a small community within our community, you are such a critical part of who we are. And we really want you all to know that we stand with you today and forever. Our country is at a crossroads, and the choices that we make following the tragedy that occurred on the 14th of December will shape our country for generations to come. And we cannot allow hate to flourish. We must get the next steps right. We must make sure that we remember who we are as we move forward, who we are at heart. The soul of this country is compassionate. Our community is one that embraces diversity and differences. We welcome those things. We encourage those things, and we must send a very, very clear message to those who would perpetrate such horrendous violence in our community that you are not welcome here. We do not want you here. We will not tolerate your behaviour, and we will do everything we possibly can to ensure that the tragedy of Bondi never happens again, as we work together to make Australia what it deserves to be, a country one of love and compassion and caring that welcomes every person who wants to call Australia home, and really send a strong message, particularly to our Territorian community, which is probably the most diverse, multicultural community in our country, that this is a place that can show you how to live your life in peace and in harmony, and we will lead the way as we move forward and show Australia and the rest of the world what the future should be for this country and what it will be. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today also to speak on this condolence motion, and I'm grateful to the Chief Minister and the Government for bringing it to this chamber today. As everyone knows in this chamber, I grew up in Bondi. I walked over that bridge that was on our screens every day of my childhood. My family and close friends still live there. The places where this violence occurred are not abstract to me, they're woven into my life and my memory. I'm also a Jewish woman. I've lived with anti-Semitism not as a theory, but as a lived reality. And that knowledge has shaped how I've experienced the days and weeks since this massacre. I want to acknowledge, as others have in the chamber today, Vida and Janice and also Ellis, also other Jewish people who I know are watching today, and other Jewish people who I know work in this building who came to talk to me over the last few months. I hope that you all feel held and honoured by what people have said in this chamber today. Immediately after the massacre, we worked with the Speaker and the DLA to arrange a memorial circle in front of Parliament House, and I want to express my particular thanks to the Speaker, both on behalf of the Jewish community and also personally for her great support for me over this time. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members of the Northern Territory community came together to lay stones in the tradition of Jewish mourning, to share condolences, to stand quietly in grief and solidarity. And as we heard from the member for Nightcliff, many people talked to me about how important it was to have a space to come together, to be able to express their condolences, their care for what had happened. And as we also heard, that memorial's now been transferred to the Holocaust Memorial, where it will remain as an ongoing reminder of this time of profound loss, but also of our Territory community choosing to respond to this with care and with humanity. Last weekend, I returned to Bondi for the first time since the massacre to attend my cousin's bat mitzvah, a young girl's coming-of-age ceremony, held only minutes from where the attack took place. I spent time at the site of the massacre, time with people who were there that night, and attended vigils held in memory of those who were killed. To move between celebration and mourning in the same place within the same days is something I will carry with me for a long time. Violence of this kind resists simple explanation. It demands seriousness, care, and humility. Anti-Semitism is real and it must be named and confronted, just as all forms of hatred and dehumanisation must be. We honour those who were killed not by rushing to certainty or blame, but by committing ourselves to understanding, to prevention, to community safety, and to responding to violence with compassion rather than fear. For me, my Jewish identity and Jewish tradition are deeply intertwined with tikkun olam, the responsibility to heal the world, and with justice. I cannot speak about this massacre without saying that this must be a time when we name all injustice, understand the connections between different forms of hatred, and speak out against all racism, all anti-Semitism, all Islamophobia, and all violence. We do not honour victims or confront hatred effectively by collapsing grief into slogans or blame. The horrific violence at Bondi cannot be reduced to protest movements, political debate, universities, journalists, or parliamentary speech. Recognising the reality of anti-Semitism does not require us to abandon careful, evidence-based understanding of violence, nor to assign collective responsibility to entire communities or movements. We dishonour those who were killed by constructing sweeping theories or assigning collective responsibility to political opponents or institutions. We honour them best by committing ourselves to understanding and prevention. We can condemn anti-Semitism, Islamophobia and terrorism unequivocally. At the same time, we can defend freedom of expression, democratic protest and the right to disagree. Speaking against anti-Semitism does not require silence on Palestinian suffering, and caring about Palestinian civilians does not imply tolerance for terrorism. As I have said before in this chamber on many matters, democratic debate itself is not a danger. Madam Speaker, this massacre took place on the Jewish festival of Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights. When I attended the memorial at Bondi Pavilion, the rabbi said, "Let this be a time to reflect on what visible light you can bring into the world." In the Jewish tradition of tikkun olam, people were encouraged to perform a mitzvah, a good deed, in memory of those who were murdered. He ended with a beautiful song, part of the Jewish Mourners Kaddish, a prayer for peace for all people of all backgrounds and all faiths. Can I read the prayer in Hebrew, Madam Speaker? Yeah. Oseh shalom bimramav, hu yasa shalom aleinu, ve'ol kol ha'olam ve'emru, amen. May the one who makes peace in the heavens bring peace on all of us and on all the world. And let us say amen. Madam Speaker, this moment calls on all of us not only to mourn but to act. The mitzvah, the good deed, the light each of us can bring is an invitation to everyone, regardless of background, of faith or community, to make a contribution towards healing and justice. In offering our deep condolences to those who are killed, to those who are injured, and to all who are grieving, we honour their lives by committing ourselves to reject hatred, to stand against violence, and to bring light into the world wherever we can. In the spirit of Tikkun Olam, each of us has the opportunity and the responsibility to heal the world in our own way. Whether through small acts of kindness, speaking out against injustice, or fostering understanding against difference, we can ensure that the memory of those lost inspires care, compassion, and justice. May this immense tragedy remind us that our strength as a community and as members of this assembly is measured not only by how we mourn, but by how we respond with courage, with compassion, and with a refusal to let hate and division define us. Today we remember, and I'm grateful to other members in this chamber for sharing the names and telling some of the stories of the people who were killed. I'd like to read their names one more time. Rabbi Eli Schlanger, Peter Ma, Boris Gorman, Sophia Gorman, Edith Brutman, Tibor Weitzen, Alexander Kleitman, Dan Elakayam, Robyn Morrison, Yakov Levitan, Marika Pogani, Adam Smith, Boris Tetelroyd, Tanya Tretiak, and Matilda. May their memory be a blessing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I too would like to express my deepest condolences to all those that have been affected by this terrible Bondi massacre. To our Jewish friends, neighbours and fellow Australians, we stand with you. Your grief is our grief, your fear is our fear, and your determination to live freely and openly is our shared determination. I now ask members to, the question is that the condolence motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye, to the contrary no. Aye. I think the ayes have it. I now ask members to stand and observe 1 minute's silence. And people in the gallery, if you'd like to join in, thank you. I thank honourable members for their contributions to this motion, and I thank all the guests that have come here today to join in this condolence motion.